Hi, welcome. I'm sorry. I was just getting ready for football season. It's football season, right? Who cares about that crap? Put that back at the MoMA. We've got week 1 same game parlay action for you on Thursday night. It's how long the summer has been. I'm down to reading books about art in museums. So thank anybody and everybody, whoever you pray to out there, thank them for the NFL back in full effect. Yes, we're going to tell you about what you can make at DraftKings. There's this awesome offer that's still there. It's at the bottom of the screen. But let's build the same game parlay. Oh, by the way, we're still going to supersize the shit out of this. So don't worry. We'll build the baseline same game. That's what I do, right? We build the baseline same game parlay. And from there, we supersize the shit out of it. Now, in this case, go to DK, make sure that the same game parlay is active. We're also going to show you, we're going to incorporate Odd Shoppers player prop bets to build the third leg for this. Let's just start out with the first one. All right, Rams win the game. I'm not even taking the 2.5. I don't need the 2.5. I'll take the Rams outright to win this. Sean McVay is 5-0 straight up in home openers. We've seen year in and year out, no matter what happens with his Rams team, winning or losing at the very last game of the season, mind you, playoff season, not regular season, his teams have come back and won the season open. 5-0 straight up in season openers. And this line initially had the Rams as the home favorite. It has been bet into oblivion now that the Bills are nearly a 3-point road favorite. Some of that has to do with the concern regarding Matthew Stafford. I understand that. There's also just this general belief now that the Buffalo Bills are the team to beat, really maybe across the board, with Kansas City kind of taking a step back. So let us take the Rams at plus 110 to win this sucker outright. Now, I also want to add to this the first half. And I'm not looking at the spread here, more so as I'm looking at the total. If we look at where the baseline number is, it's 24.5 on DK. That's the minus 110, minus 130, 25.5, minus 105, minus 135. This range right here is about the flat number that DraftKings is offering as the first half total on the same game parlay. I want to push it. I think we can get to 26.5. I think we can get to 27 points. 27. Why are we not going 28, Shander? That's a real 4-touchdown score possibility because I don't want to risk anything. Missed extra point, failed attempt for 2, what have you. These are now realities in NFL games. And you have 2 coaches that are a little out there, especially the home coach. So we'll go over 26.5 as far as the first half total. So now we're locked in with the Rams on the money line, and we have over 26.5 to get to 27 first half points. That's the first 2 legs of our same game parlay here for Thursday Night Football. Let's head on over to Odd Shopper before we supersize the shit out of this sucker. Now, I'm using, in Pennsylvania, the Sharp Sportsbook line projection, and I want the best projected ROI. What you can do if you want is go to the best projected win percentage, which will also factor in a third leg here of our parlay. So Ben Skoranek, if I can Russo that here, 67% chance of going over 1.5 total receptions. Here's the problem. Are you going to be able to find Ben Skoranek on here? Receiving yards, yes. Let's move down and see if we can get to receptions, though. That's the big part of the same game parlay. Oh, here we are. Ben Skoranek, as far as receptions, Odd Shopper has him destroying this 67% that he hits 2 receptions, okay? 2 receptions. Now, 2 plus is minus 245 here. Adding this gets us a plus 425. We don't need to go crazy, all right? I know you want to go crazy, and that's what the same game parlay supersize that we're about to do is. And we're not even going to play Ben Skoranek, so you don't have to worry about that. This is our baseline same game parlay. Rams on the money line, over 26.5 first half total points, 2+ receptions for Ben Skoranek. All right, that gets you plus 425. and a nice, easy way to build a bankroll here.
All right. Hey, the boys are back. Well, kind of. 2 of the 3. Maybe we'll have 3 for next week. But for today, we're back. We're breaking it all down. Kicking off week 1 of the 2022 NFL season. Glad to have you guys with us as well. I'm Dave Loughran from Stokastic DFS. Lot of questions lately, right? For those of you that weren't here throughout the summer, understandably so, baseball can be a drag. We changed names. That's it. A little bit of a rebrand. Nothing else whatsoever. So you're still going to see myself, Dave Loughran, at Laffy_D on Twitter. Hit your boy up, LOUGHY_D. And Matt Gajewski at Matt_Gajewski. Good to be back, man. Glad to be back with you.
Yeah, man. I can't tell you how excited I am. We have real meaningful football tonight, not preseason, not this FCS versus FBS college football action, real meaningful snaps. And we have an amazing matchup. You couldn't have drawn this up better. You know, this isn't the old Thursday night football. Jaguars taking on the Browns of old. We have 2 marquee teams facing off tonight. Close spread, high total, literally everything you could want for a debut.
Don't sell yourself short, though. Those FCS college football videos are crushing. That 1 week, it was like, first of all, I didn't even know there was week 0 in college football, but you're doing week 0 just between awful teams and crushing it because people like to win money. All of that on the Odd Shopper channel as well.
Yeah, man. Any kind of football, AAF, XFL, USFL, preseason, I don't care. I'm just excited for it. I'm glad we have the best of the best tonight, which we haven't had in a while. So I'm just pumped.
And I'm excited to have you guys with us. Man, we had some strategy shows already, but this is the first game day. We had some preseason football. Matt and I were getting some reps in throughout August, but now we're back, baby. So happy to have you guys here. You make it worth doing, I'll tell you that much. But if I might ask, hit that thumbs up if you haven't done so yet. Helps us greatly. Walk in, take a second, hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the channel if you're new here. Welcome. Like you, Larry Longo, welcome to Team Awesemo. You can join the team as well. if you want. You can subscribe down there. You get the free super chats each month, the custom emojis, the sweet badges that you see in chat right now. And we got a suicide, or what do they call them now? What's the proper term? A survival pool?
Survival pool. Yeah.
Survival. It used to be they used to call them suicide pools back in the day.
Yeah, I understand why that doesn't fly anymore, but
yeah.
survival.
Plus, I don't really understand why they were called that in the first place. Like, you're not, you know what I mean? You're not intentionally taking yourself out of the tournament.
Yeah, that doesn't make any sense. I don't even remember that.
No, you're a little younger. So I'm telling you, some people will remember that. Yeah, Mike says he remembers as well. But yeah, we got the survival pool going if you're a subscriber too, which is pretty sweet. So some incentives there. I think we got a lot of prizes up top, so that should be a lot of fun. Eagles are still trash. Welcome this team, Stokastic. Yeah, I love that name. All right, man. You ready to do this?
Yeah, man, I'm pumped. It's like going back in time, firing up the old tools. Forgot how useful they really are. Because I mean, like, thinking through the slate before we even broke it down this morning, my first thought was like, how are we going to handle Isaiah McKenzie? So I'm just really happy we have some of the tools to go back on, and I'm pumped to break this down, man.
Yeah, and the Bills' backfield as well is one that you and I discussed, even in the preseason, talking about, like, does Zach Moss get work? What is this going to look like? Does he get goal line work? The Bills are an odd team for sure. And yet, dude, every year when I do this, I have to remember what the process was. Like, all right, what tools am I using? How do I set this up? Sometimes I even forget how we run the show, but fortunately, I got all these run sheets to make it a little easier. Yeah, we'll pull the tools up as well, and let's make it happen. First up, though, for anyone that was, like you or myself coming back into this, Matt, that hasn't done anything except turn on this show in terms of prep, for Showdown strategy, for the regular, not for the preseason, which is just, absurd. And hopefully not for that year where the Patriots were the, winning Showdown captain every single week. How do you approach Showdown slates when you have two really good teams like this with just a bevy of weapons on each side?
Yeah, I think first and foremost, you need to consider what size field you're playing. If you're playing really large fields, you need to think about duplication in Showdown more than anything else. That's going to really hurt your ROI if you're playing lineups that are duplicated with a lot of people, because then when you win, you're not actually getting paid off for what you should be, predicting the correct lineup. So duplication first and foremost, and that all depends on the size of field. If you're playing cash or small field tournaments, you don't have to worry about this as much. And then with the specific scoring environments that come from a potential shootout like this, you don't want to look at kickers and defenses quite as much. With that said, those typically go a little under owned, so you can gain some leverage in large field tournaments. But overall, when we have big showdown slates with the shootout style teams, I'm trying to target some of the ancillary pass catching options, these guys that might actually get opportunities to score in a shootout environment rather than the defenses and kickers, which perform a little bit better in these low scoring environments.
Man, and it's interesting too, because this game still has a high total. It still has a 52-point total, but you're talking about two teams that had very good defenses last year. I know the Bills secondary doesn't look the same right now, particularly with Tre'Davious White out, but they were still good last year, even after he went out. They allowed 12 total passing touchdowns on the season. And then the Rams allowed a decent amount of yards, but second fewest passing touchdowns. PFF graded them as the number one overall offense, graded them as the number one overall run defense, graded them with the number one pass rush. And of course, the secondary, like I said, coughed up some yards, but real bend don't break, a lot of short pass mentality there. So high total, two really good offenses. But man, I don't think we can sleep on the fact that you also have two really good defenses as well.
Yeah, without a doubt. And I think a lot's being made of this, we'll call it injury situation for Buffalo. It's not just Tre'Davious White. Jordan Poyer is a guy who's had some contract issues this offseason. He's been on the injury report all week. There's rumors coming out of Buffalo that if he plays, which it seems like he's expected to, he could be playing in some sort of limited capacity, which doesn't sound good. And I mean, when you're facing Stafford and Kupp and Allen Robinson and the slew of weapons that the Rams have, it does lend itself to a high scoring environment. On the other side, the Rams, I mean, they've been solid, but they have allowed some production, to your point, in certain situations. And I mean, they're not asking Ramsey to shadow anymore. So I don't think he's going to erase one individual player. So it's not like you can even break ties with some of these receivers on the Bills and be like, okay, who's Ramsey shadowing? Maybe I want to downgrade that guy. That's not even something they're doing. So to me, the total tells it all. I think even though we have good defenses on both sides, we will see some scoring in this game. And maybe those defenses will matter a little more in other matchups against some offenses that aren't quite up to this caliber.
All right, let's rock. Bills laying 2.5 on the road against the defending Super Bowl champs. Now, this is such a weird team, man. And if you guys, want to pull up the slate along with us, if you want to pull up any of the projections that we have, the single game showdown ownership projections, we have those. Also, the top stat or the top plays tool is the one. I think that's the one you and I probably use the most.
That's
right?
The one I use the most for sure.
Yeah. It gives you top play probability, or the probability that they're going to be the top overall score, which is huge. Gives you captain ownership, regular ownership. It gives you the probability that they'll be within the 2 through 6. So basically a flex, one of the top 2 through 6 and not the top overall score, leverage scores. And if you use the promo code SCRAMBLE, SCRAMBLE, my recommendation, go to awesemo.com/promos. Mike can throw the link in chat. You get 7 days for $7. So $1 a day, and you spend $7 in a day without blinking and you don't even know where it went. This gets you not just Showdown, but literally everything that we have on the site for football, baseball, PGA, UFC, whatever it is, all of our niche sports, tennis, college football, everything, $7. Use the promo code SCRAMBLE. It's easier to go to awesemo.com/promos and click that button that says Scramble. But yeah, everything on the site, $7, 7 days, $1 a day. You can follow along with us and get all of our tools, projections, ownership, top stack, all of the Showdown stuff, top plays. There's too much for me to talk about, but you'll see. $1 a day, 7 days for $7. All right. So looking at this now, I actually want to start with the backfield because you have Devin Singletary, who legitimately played 100% of snaps in that divisional round, that heartbreaking loss, Matt. And we saw him over the final quarter of the season as one of the top fantasy running backs in the league. But then they go in, they spend a day 2 pick on James Cook. And there's all this word in camp from the coaches that Zach Moss looks like he did when he was healthy. Is Moss going to be the goal line back along with Josh Allen, and James Cook gets the third down work while Devin Singletary is getting the first and second down work in between the 20s? What should we expect here tonight? And it's a tough matchup.
Yeah, it is a tough matchup. The Rams really stout up front, led by Aaron Donald. But there's a slew of good players in that front seven. They add Bobby Wagner. I mean, he's going to be a future Hall of Famer. A little older in his career, but anytime you can add a linebacker like that, it's going to drastically increase the production of your front seven. So looking at this matchup, I think you honestly laid it out well. And you and I talked about this all throughout the preseason. We did multiple games where the Bills were on the slate. And one thing we learned, Zach Moss is a part of this backfield. Whenever Buffalo got into red zone territory, they siphoned out their top 2 running backs, James Cook and Devin Singletary, and put in Zach Moss. Now, are they going to do that in the regular season? They use Josh Allen a lot in that capacity too. So I do think there is some concern with Zach Moss in that role. And we're kind of trying to read the tea leaves here. But if I were to just talk to you about who I think is going to receive the most work overall, it's probably Devin Singletary. He's the veteran in the offense who they trust. To your point, they did give him 100% of the snaps on numerous occasions last year. I like James Cook long-term, and he probably plays on obvious third down situations, but we're still talking about a rookie in his first NFL game who didn't get a ton of work in the preseason because of his draft capital. So is he really going to play that role right out the gate where maybe it's a 50-50 split? I personally don't think so. And that's a trend we've seen throughout rookies in the NFL. A lot of really good rookies, especially at the running back position, take a few weeks to actually work into whatever their role is going to be long-term. So Cook, to me, I don't think he has as much upside as a guy like Devin Singletary, who hasn't been great as a pass catcher efficiency-wise, but we know he can at least catch passes and he's serviceable out there. And then Zach Moss would be third. He's kind of like that touchdown-dependent back. And again, I have questions with that role just in the regular season and how much they've used Josh Allen around the goal line. He could be more as like a short yardage, 3rd and 1 situation between the 20s, which would really hurt Zach Moss, in my opinion. But did you kind of view that the same way coming into this game?
100% the same way. But that's what kind of makes it tough, because while I definitely see Devin Singletary as the top option, but I don't think there should be any debate with that right now. Like usage in the preseason, usage last year. Yes, you brought on a running back. I get all of that, but Devin Singletary, I'd put it to you this way, Matt. I think it's still his job to lose in terms of like the majority of touches. The issue is it's not as clear cut as you're going to get with other running back situations. And I hate to break it to you guys, it's not as clear cut with the Rams either, between Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson. But the crazy thing about like Zach Moss is he's so cheap. Does he have 30 yards and a touchdown? If you had to put a number on his run, let's do this. Forget about rushing or goal line touches for a second. If you had to put a number on his rushing attempts or on his snaps, like where would you put him today?
Probably like
he sees the field.
I think he sees the field, but I would put it at like 17.5%.
Okay.
Like this is just a guess off the top of my head, but I think Singletary is probably, if we're not going to include quarterbacks and overall touches, just running back touches, I think Singletary is between 40 and 50%, probably on the upper end of that. And then James Cook is probably around 30-ish. And it doesn't leave a lot for Moss. Like Moss isn't a pass catcher. We know that. He's not explosive. He's just bigger and more physical than the two other backs who are both around 200 pounds. I mean, the role he plays does make sense from a size perspective, but is he a guy you really want on the field in 1st and 10 situations where maybe he needs to leak out into the flat and catch a pass if the play has changed or something like that? That's where I have concerns, especially for a guy they essentially put into the doghouse completely last year in favor of Singletary in the same offense. So I'm going to say maximum like 20% of the snaps is my guess, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's as low as like 15-10.
All right. So if we come full circle here, then do you like Singletary, or do you just think that Singletary is kind of still the main guy here?
So I think Singletary is fine. He's a little bit expensive in my opinion. And I cross-reference this with our tools just to see, okay, like who's going under-owned on the Bills? And Singletary, in my opinion, was coming in a little over-owned, and everything on the back end kind of bears this out. You have to pay $7K for him in a timeshare, potentially with 3 backs. The leverage score is actually negative 7.2%, which is one of the higher marks on this slate.
Yeah.
So it appears he's still projected to get some ownership here. And maybe people quite haven't reacted to that 3-man backfield that we could see in the preseason. You know, people don't quite have their eye on the pulse yet. And that's kind of been the case for all these backs. They all have slightly negative leverage scores. Singletary's is just higher than the rest. And to your point on Moss, he does have that touchdown upside. He's really cheap. So if I'm taking a shot on one, I think it's Moss tentatively. Cook, I'd love to see in his pass catching role, but I'm just not sure he gets that in week 1. But back to the projections and our leverage scores, Cook has the best leverage score among the 3. He's also very cheap.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, Moss has a pretty low leverage score. He's getting virtually no ownership, but even so, it doesn't look great for him. It's just a tough backfield, man. This is a tough game in the backfields, but the passing game gets really interesting. Not when you look at Stephon Diggs or Gabe Davis, who I think is going to have a great season, but when you look at Isaiah McKenzie, because McKenzie's a guy, and I know you and I have talked about this plenty of times on Showdown slates, that once in a while last year you'd hear his name. You know, he remember he had that 12 target game, that monster performance against New England. I think was Davis or Diggs? One of them was out. Someone was sidelined, but still, McKenzie had a huge performance. Once in a while he popped up, but now you look at him, who's full practice too. He had that groin. It looks like he's starting as the starting slot receiver over Jamison Crowder, who was brought in presumably at the time to be that guy. McKenzie's really cheap for a presumed starter on a Bills team. We saw what Cole Beasley disappeared a lot. I know that, right? But Cole Beasley had some huge games and some huge, target volume games with Josh Allen under center in the past. Can we get those type of sporadic games for McKenzie? And last thing I'll say, Matt, is if you actually look at the Rams last year, I was saying they allowed the second fewest passing touchdowns, right? But they also allowed like the 10th most passing yards and one of the highest completion percentages. In a matchup like that, it kind of bodes well for a slot guy in McKenzie's sense, don't you think?
Yeah, I love McKenzie here. I think the only hole you can really poke in him is the injury, and maybe he's limited today, but everything suggests he's going to play, and I'm going to treat him like he's at full health. And in that role, he's been efficient every time he's been given it. He just doesn't always receive it because he's like this small little gadget guy who plays on special teams. It seems like teams had previously kind of put him into that role and not given him a full workload. And then out of necessity, when they have forced him into a full-time receiver role, he's done nothing but produce. So from an on-field perspective, I think McKenzie's awesome. He should probably be one of the first players in your lineup if you're playing cash or small field tournaments. I think the real interesting question with him becomes, what do we do with the ownership and what do we do with the potential duplication for a receiver at 2,400 on DraftKings? And this is interesting. Cody Main on Twitter has done some really good work with this. He went back and looked at some previous situations. There was a situation last year where Rondale Moore was 2K and he was walking into this every down slot role. And there was the same with Hunter Renfrow early in the season at 2,800 before he really blew up. And both of them actually came in lower owned than what people thought they were going to. They were both sub 40% owned, which is awesome for these tournaments. It should give you confidence playing them. But at the same time, their duplication was absolutely absurd. Lineups that did include them, they on average had 17.4 dupes, but the way you built those lineups, if you were maxing out salary with them, they were more likely to be duplicated. And when you were using maybe a little salary left on the table, they were less likely to be. So rather than try to predict the actual outcome, is McKenzie going to have a great game or not? I've been trying to think about this from a game theory perspective. What does having McKenzie in my lineup actually do to my chances of winning? And how do I build lineups with him that can actually get to the top without a lot of duplicates?
Yeah, good thoughts. I mean, look, we're going to build a lineup at the end of the show. If we have time, maybe we can build two and work McKenzie into something, but there's got to be some ways to differentiate, right? I mean, we haven't projected at 15.6% utility. I think that comes up throughout the day. Like, it has to, right?
I think so too. But like to Cody's point, how high does it really get? Based on the previous examples with Renfrow and Rondale Moore, the field has shown us in the past, like he's not going to get exorbitant ownership. It's not going to get to the point where it's like, all right, he's so owned, I should fade him now. I think it just means I should be more thoughtful of what my lineups look like that include him.
Sure. I guess the question is, how easy is it going to be to build lineups without him?
We'll find out. I built a lot this morning, and the ones that have him sure do look good.
Yeah. And other people are saying the same thing, I'm sure. So I get it. But look, if you go Josh Allen and Stefan Diggs, if you captain Allen, you're looking at 5,700 remaining. And then, Cooper Kupp's price point is exorbitant. There's no doubt about that. But yeah, you throw McKenzie in there and you're like, all right, I got a little bit of room now to work with this if I want. Oh man, you're right. You're right. This is where it gets tricky for sure. How do you want to develop builds around guys like Josh Allen and Diggs and Gabe Davis and this passing game in general? Dawson Knox just signed a monster contract yesterday. Was it a 4-year extension, 31 guaranteed, $54 million contract?
Yeah, you bring up a couple of really good players. First of all, I'm really interested in Diggs. I think people are going to prioritize Kupp, and it makes sense. He was the best receiver in the NFL last year, just absolutely unbelievable volume metrics from Stafford, and he's playing that role in the slot, which has historically been awesome for Stafford. I don't think anything changes with Kupp, but I think people are also overlooking Diggs and how consistent he was. And yes, he kind of disappointed from a season-long perspective. He didn't have that explosive season that a lot of people in seasonal fantasy leagues hoped for when they drafted in the first round. But this is a guy that still had 164 targets, which is just unbelievable volume metrics. And he's going to be playing with Josh Allen, arguably the number one fantasy quarterback in all of the NFL. So our leverage scores actually mirror this. They think Diggs is going slightly under-owned comparatively to Cooper Kupp. And I think that's a spot where maybe you can gain some leverage if you captain Diggs and use Josh Allen in the flex. And then maybe you just play some cheaper Rams rather than going all out on Cooper Kupp. And none of this is to slight Cooper Kupp. He's an awesome player, but you also have to consider price. Like Diggs is significantly cheaper than Kupp. Kupp at 12,400, Diggs coming in at 9K flat. Yes, there's a difference in volume, but is it that drastic with the ownership we're projected to see? In my opinion, Diggs is an awesome leverage play, and that's kind of surprising to say considering he's maybe a top 6 receiver in the NFL.
All right, so Gabe Davis last year over the last 5 games that he played, including the postseason, saw 1 fewer target than Diggs, ran. And by the way, this isn't me countering the Diggs point. I obviously like Diggs, especially at that price point. But he saw 1 fewer target than Diggs. He ran 8 fewer routes than Diggs. And Josh Allen was clearly comfortable locking on to him in the biggest game of both of their careers. Gabe Davis, even in his first and second year, right? If you actually look at the production and the efficiency when he was on the field and not just the raw totals, he was good. I mean, yards per route run, you can hit him deep downfield. He's a legitimate red zone and end zone threat. I got to say, though, I know that his price isn't that far off from Diggs, but I still like Gabe Davis in a spot like this. And here's what I mean. I know he has a way lower, top play probability than Diggs, which to me, I mean, it seems low, but he still has a very positive leverage score. With Gabe Davis, I just see a lot of, and I'm not saying he's the same archetype as Diggs, but he has Josh Allen throwing him the ball. He has all of the tools that you need to be the type of guy that can explode for the type of game we saw in Kansas City. Maybe not to that extent, but you know what I'm saying? Like he had a 2-touchdown game in week 15 as well. He can do huge things. These are the type of players that in a showdown slate, I'm more than willing to run out there. And yeah, 57% captain ownership. I get that. I think that's probably accurate, but we still have him with a positive leverage score.
And we have a positive leverage score in the captain spot. He's about a percent under-owned, even if you want to captain Gabe Davis. And to your point on the projections, we're going into week 1. I think it's accurate to use a little more just historical averages for these players. And Diggs, throughout the history of his career, has been an alpha number 1 receiver. But you can also spin this a different way. Like we have to put inputs into the projections to get these raw numbers. In the playoffs, they were playing not the same role, but it was close to your point. Gabe Davis was not far behind Diggs whatsoever. So if you personally think that continues, maybe you can bump Davis a little bit in Fantasy Cruncher or whatnot, or just make sure maybe you get a little bit over that 8.4 optimal captain ownership because you think Davis is going to handle a larger role. And maybe Diggs, who's getting a little bit older in age, takes a slight step back. And again, it doesn't have to be these major differences in the projections, but even a little bit can get you more Gabe Davis if that's a stance you personally want to take. And to your point, even if you just look at the projections as they are now, which is what I'm going to do, you're going to get a ton of Gabe Davis, 4% leverage score, positive leverage score in the captain spot, positive leverage score really across the board with Gabe Davis. Yes, the price is close to Diggs, but to your point on the efficiency and the upside, anyone who's playing an every down role with Josh Allen has that upside. So Gabe Davis is another guy I think we should be prioritizing. And that's really the case with these top 2 Bills receivers. What gets interesting to me is what we do with Dawson Knox. And did you have a lean on Dawson Knox right away? Because he's a negative leverage score. And honestly, I'm not 100% sure I agree with it.
I think what makes it tough for me is that his price is so close to Gabe Davis. But does Dawson Knox have 2 touchdown upside? Yeah, of course he had 1, 2. He had 3 games with multiple touchdowns last year. He scored 11 times on the season. I'm sorry, I'm including 2 games, 2 touchdowns from the postseason, but still 9 scores in the regular season. So yeah, Dawson Knox is one of those guys that can absolutely produce those numbers. This is, again, Matt, I don't mean to just talk in circles. It's a high-powered offense and a high-powered passing offense with, one of the preeminent quarterbacks in the league. That's the issue here. It's so hard to go wrong with any of these guys. It could be Dawson Knox. It could be McKenzie. It wouldn't shock me if McKenzie had, scores and has 80 yards. Who knows? We've seen Beasley do it. Could be Diggs. It could be, Gabe Davis. I guess the question really is when you're prioritizing him, where do you prioritize Knox among these guys at his price point?
Yeah. So my question with the current iteration of the projections, again, these change throughout the day. So make sure you, especially if you're building lineups right before kick, make sure you're checking them. You should do that regardless. But essentially the same price point, 7.2K for Gabe Davis, 6.8 for Knox. It's my personal feel that don't you think people are going to pick Gabe Davis over Knox?
Yeah. That would be.
Yeah. My thought is like, can we get positive leverage with Knox?
Yeah. 1%.
And plus, like, this has shaken out perfectly for him. They cut OJ Howard. Quentin Morris is hurt right now. He's questionable for the game. And I mean, Quentin Morris, he's a UDFA out of Bowling Green anyway. So like, do we really think Quentin Morris is getting on the field over Knox? They do have Sweeney on the roster. He's not played a lot in the last couple of years. So, I thought perhaps OJ Howard was going to share this role with Knox, but him getting cut kind of just opens this path for Knox to play that same every down role. He lines up in the slot a lot. Like, maybe he's the more logical replacement to Cole Beasley in that like underneath slot role than even McKenzie, who has a lot more explosiveness. I don't know. I think you're right about this potential role Knox might have.
I think you're right. I mean, the ownership's basically non-existent for someone like Knox today on a single game slate. Yeah. It's clearly the price point because it's so close to Gabe Davis, but you know what? Maybe you're right. The Gabe Davis right now is kind of the shiny new toy when it comes to, like if you just think about it like from a psychological standpoint, the only thing people have heard about all season or all off season, Matt, is Gabe Davis in Buffalo, right? Like what's fresh in the minds? The 4-touchdown game against the Chiefs, or the fact that Gabe Davis is in fantasy leagues, what? 5th, 6th round picks, 7th round pick. It depends where you're drafting, but yeah, I think you've sold me. I think you've sold me on Dawson Knox potentially being that guy.
We'll see throughout the day. I think he could be a leverage play, but yeah, I guess we'll have to wait and see what the projections do throughout the next 12 hours or so.
Yeah. And two, I mean, this is just a very, very, very good secondary for the Rams, but some damn good corners as well. They can make life tough on guys like Gabe Davis and Stephon Diggs.
Yeah, for sure. With that said, it's really interesting. The Rams permitted a lot of catches last year.
Yeah.
3rd most catches in the NFL. They were, you said this in the beginning of the show, they were a bend, don't break defense. And maybe if that changes just a little bit, you have that slight regression, they go towards the middle of the pack. I personally don't know if I agree with that just because they have really good corners and a really good secondary and they have an awesome pass rush, but it's not out of the realm of possibility. Or if one of them just gets hurt, they could have a significant regression.
It's weird. They allow the 3rd most receptions to wide receivers, the 4th most yards, and the 2nd fewest touchdowns.
That's wild.
It's crazy. Yeah, it's crazy. But at the same time, from a fantasy points perspective, the Rams allow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8th most fantasy points per game to wide receivers. So yeah, in terms of just overall racking up yards and receptions, not the worst spot. It's just got to get in the end zone. Anything else you want to talk about with the Bills? Any real punts?
We kind of glossed over Josh Allen, but I mean, Josh Allen's awesome.
Yeah, we know the answer there.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to talk leverage scores, he's still providing positive leverage. Interestingly, a lot of that's coming in the utility. So right now it suggests maybe he's slightly overowned in the captain, but honestly, I think there's ways to build uniqueness into your lineups where you can still captain Josh Allen. He's a very easy evaluation.
All right. Well, from a kicker standpoint, maybe this, I don't want to overthink it, but with the whole bend don't break mentality for the Rams, maybe this isn't the worst spot for Tyler Bass.
kickers in general, unless something drastically changes in Showdown, the way people play it, kickers are usually underowned. Now, I personally think they're better flex plays because you need to kick like 5-6 field goals to actually eclipse a guy like Cooper Kupp in the captain spot, even price adjusted. But generally speaking, these guys are way underowned in the flex spot. And I mean, it makes sense. You want to play new shiny toy Isaiah McKenzie. You want to play maybe Zach Moss, who can fall in the end zone twice and get you that GPP winning score. But, you know, kickers have a lot more safety. They're very projectable in terms of their opportunity. I like both Bass, and if you want to talk Gay on the other side, I think they're both pretty good price adjusted plays. They're both providing positive leverage in our tools. I think they make a lot of sense as players that are typically underowned.
Massive leverage scores on both of them, specifically on Bass. So second highest on the slate, behind the guy we're about to talk about. Yeah, I guess that works. Sounds weird, but right now, before we do though, if you guys haven't checked out Drafters, still time. You still have time to throw your hat in the ring for $250,000 up top. And more than anything, if you've already signed up for Underdog, maybe you want more action, or you're saying, all right, these are not soft contests. A lot of sharp drafters over there. Softer contests over at Drafters. That's what everyone's saying, at least. You don't have to look any further, because at Drafters, not only can you go over there, compete for, in a $100 million prize pool, $250K up top with softer contests, and more importantly, one that is certainly looking like it's going to have a considerable amount of overlay. If you use the promo code Stokastic, STOKASTIC, when you sign up, right? There's a link in the description. Mike can throw one in the chat as well. They will give you up to $100 first match deposit bonus. So you put in $100 first deposit match bonus up to $100. Boom. Beautiful thing. Put yourself in a good position, get your lineups in there, compete for $250K. Now you're spread out. You're diverse across whether it's Underdog, Drafters, DraftKings, whatever, and you're getting free money when you do it. When you sign up, they're going to match it up to $100 with the promo code Stokastic. So check that out. Mike, how filled is that right now? So you still have 14,000 open as far as like drafts go? Yeah, there you go. Stokastic promo code up to $100 first match deposit bonus when you sign up. All right, so the Rams. Let's do the same thing we did with the Bills and start with the backfield first, and then we can work our way through it. There's a wide receiver that has a 12.4% leverage score, by far the highest on this slate of any player of any team. But you see rumors out there that Darrell Henderson and Cam Akers could be splitting 50-50. Do you see it that way? Because I still think Akers has a slight edge here, given what I saw after he returned from basically a season-ending Achilles injury last season.
I think that's the safer bet. I don't think it's going to be the Akers of old, that bell cow role, but I do think he is the edge. He's the guy that they've tried to consistently give the work to. He's a solid pass catcher for his size. People sometimes neglect that. He was awesome in college as a pass catcher. He's been good in the NFL in that regard. He's the bigger back. He's the guy that can hold up on 3-down workload more so than Henderson, who's really never been able to do it. The only question you have with Akers is that efficiency, the efficiency that he came back to 6 months off an Achilles tear. I personally wasn't expecting it to be great, and it wasn't. Does that persist through this year, or does the additional 6+ months of rehab really help Akers in this spot? And we've seen running backs come back from Achilles tears since, the old days where it was kind of a death sentence to their careers. Now I think Akers can at least regain most of that efficiency. And the fact that he does play in the pass game has me optimistic. He's a little expensive on this slate because I think it'll be somewhat of a timeshare regardless. But I think just raw upside, Akers has more of it than Henderson. But what were your thoughts on this backfield right away? And did you agree with that?
All right. So how weird was it last year to see Sony Michel straight bell cow back when Darrell Henderson went down? And then Henderson came back for 2 games before getting injured again, I think. And Michel was still the guy. And then Akers plays 13 snaps in the regular season, all of them in week 18, hardly involved. And then I know you and I talked about this on this very show. Like, okay, what's Akers' role going to be? First game of the postseason, straight bell cow back for Cam Akers. Things changed a little bit throughout the postseason, but he still out-touched Sonny Michel dramatically, and he wasn't even good. So am I to expect that Sean McVay goes with a hot hand? Does he want to give I see it as Akers, not Akers' shot to lose per se, but more Akers gets the first crack at it. And if he's playing well and if he's running well, he's going to get more opportunities. We've seen McVay do that in the past when he had, when he was running multiple backs.
If you look at the history of McVay and the way he uses running backs, he prefers a bell cow. He's used bell cows all the way back, like through the Todd Gurley days. But even when, Todd Gurley would go down, he would use some ridiculous backs as bell cows, like CJ Anderson. These guys would have like 25 touch upside in his offense. And I think that's certainly the case with Akers. And I mean, one of those games in the playoffs where he started to kind of lose that bell cow role, didn't he go out with a rib injury in one of those games? Correct me if I'm wrong.
Who, Akers or Henderson?
Akers. I believe he got banged up in a playoff game too. He played that.
Yeah. You're talking about this past season.
Yeah. So he comes back.
Yeah.
They ease him back in. And then there's that like one game where he has the bell cow workload. He doesn't really cede any work. And then the next game, we're all thinking it's going to be the same thing. And he leaves with a rib injury, I believe, at least partway through the game. And then people, I think, overlooked that and talked about the efficiency, which wasn't great. And I mean, we definitely need to talk about it, but they kind of used that as the reason the workload fell and excused the injury away, when I think the injury definitely played a role.
Yeah. And he was still coming off an Achilles. I mean, he wasn't, that happened right before, that happened in the summer. That happened in July. He wasn't expected back at all, and he came back. So, yeah, I guess from a fantasy standpoint, though, do we look at Cam Akers or Darrell Henderson as good plays tonight? I guess, yeah, like gets down to the brass tacks here. Which one of these, if either of them makes sense? Because Matt, spoiler alert here, and I don't mind giving out, some info to you guys in week one. Oh, lineup generator for week one, main slate and Showdown is totally free. Brand new tool, awesome tool, totally free for the week. So are MLB player projections today. Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson have the two lowest leverage scores, worst leverage scores of any players on this slate.
I saw that, and I think it's when they'll be in a timeshare, given their prices. Like Akers is more expensive than Gabe Davis, Dawson Knox, a lot of guys that have really good projected opportunities. So I understand the negative leverage on Akers. It's not just the timeshare, but it's also his price point. And then you can say the same thing about Henderson at 4.8K. Like you have the kickers behind him. You have Isaiah McKenzie behind him, a couple other players that are in timeshares. Like he's pretty close to Tyler Higbee, who we'll talk in a little bit. So the negative leverage score makes sense, but I think the question should also be asked, what is the upside? And with Akers, you do have that 3 down back upside. So I don't want to X him out of my player pool. I'll probably end up under the field, which is what our projections are suggesting, but I'm still going to play some Cam Akers without a doubt, because we've seen him handle that workload in the past. And McVay, he's been a little fluky with the way he uses his backs, but he does prefer a workhorse. So that is in the range of outcomes.
I agree. It is. The only issue I have is he seems overpriced. That's the only thing.
Agreed.
Like just a bit overpriced. Allen Robinson has the highest leverage score on this site. If you wonder why we talk about leverage scores, they're really important. You're talking about, what are the top play probability? What is their ownership? That's how, especially on these single game sites, you're going to give yourself an edge because, and maybe you could explain it better, Matt, but as far as probabilities go, even if a guy has a low probability, but the ownership is non-existent, you're still putting yourself in an advantageous situation if you're trying to win tournaments and if you're trying not to chop it with 1,000 people.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, we all, think we're expert analysts, but it's a very volatile game we're playing. And we know things do not play out on the football field the way we are going to predict them to. That's just the way it is. Sometimes the chalk smashes, sometimes it doesn't. But a leverage score is a way to combine projected fantasy points with projected ownership and how often these guys are actually the top scorer versus the rate at which the field is playing them. And then you can do that for captain, you can do that for utility. And that is what our projections provide in the top plays tool, which to me, I think is the most valuable tool we have, especially for Showdown, where you have the added wrinkle of the captain spot. So hopefully that explains it fairly well. It's just a way to look at the chances these guys are top plays, top scores with how often they're being owned. So what that means is how often they're likely in the top lineups, the winning lineups, versus how much they're being played.
And I'm not saying that that Allen Robinson isn't going to be popular at all. But man, 6,200, is it, this is really the first good quarterback he's ever played with.
Going back to high school.
Really?
That's not an exaggeration.
Who were his quarterbacks in college?
Christian Hackenberg.
Ooh.
Yeah, that was the Hackenberg. If you thought Blake Bortles was bad, go watch some of those Penn State games.
So this is, I mean, we saw what happened with Matthew Stafford when he went to a good team that actually had weapons. You know, they win the Super Bowl year one. Now Stafford's got Cooper Kupp and he's got Allen Robinson. Stafford also said that his elbow feels better than it did to start the 2021 season. So I don't know, all those irregularities or whatever that was happening this summer, with the concern that Sean McVay had about Matthew Stafford, I guess that's out the window. I don't know. What I do know is that if you could, you would want to stack this offense. Matthew Stafford, Allen Robinson, of course, Cooper Kupp, obvious answer there. Insanely expensive, but we've seen what he can do each and every season, coming off of, what did he have set? How many? Oh my God, dude. Just the yardage totals for this guy.
I know, I'm looking at him. It's unbelievable. 16 scores.
Including the postseason, he had 2,400 yards, 178 receptions, and 22 touchdowns.
Unbelievable season for Kupp.
My God, dude. So you want to do that. How easy is it going to be to get, you know, Matthew Stafford in there with Kupp and Robinson? And I'll preface it with this. I think that's obviously why you're getting a lot of captain ownership on Allen Robinson, because it might afford you the ability to go Cooper Kupp and Matthew Stafford in the flex spots.
For sure. I personally think if you're just a little mindful of roster construction, it's not hard to get all those players together, especially when you consider you do have the punt play in Isaiah McKenzie. So as long as you move things around and captain the right players, you can get those guys in the lineup without sacrificing too much. With that said, how duplicated are those lineups going to be? Which is a major question to me when you yeah, I think so too, especially when you're including Kupp. And this is a really interesting situation to talk about, because Kupp has the historic season. He gets the upgrade at quarterback, but he also kind of had the seize part in terms of opportunity. Robert Woods gets hurt. The wide receiver 2 for a lot of that season's Van Jefferson, or maybe Tyler Higbee, you could argue, is the wide receiver 2 for parts of that year. There really wasn't a legitimate second receiving option behind Kupp for a large portion of that season. Now you bring in Allen Robinson, who is a legitimate wide receiver 2. The efficiency was not good last year. A couple reasons for that. One, he's playing with the Chicago Bears in Matt Nagy's horrific offense. 2, he got hurt immediately in the season. And then, like the tough dude he is, he tries to play through it. And we know what soft tissue injuries do to efficiency. It's not good. Other than that, and the year he tore his ACL, which happened in week 1, the guy's put up nothing but efficient seasons with some of the worst quarterback play you could possibly imagine in the NFL. He's still under 30 years old. That's kind of that sort of cliff position where these guys take a step back, but I don't think Robinson's at that point yet in his career. Also, like, same quarterback change Kupp went through last year. He's now playing without a doubt the best quarterback of his career. And this also comes down to price. He's half as expensive as Cooper Kupp. Half. And behind Allen Robinson, this team has nothing. Van Jefferson's hurt. We're looking at some combination of Ben Skowronek, Tutu Atwell, and maybe Lance McCutcheon, who's our preseason hero. But the guy made the roster because of injuries that have occurred ahead of him on the depth chart. Robinson and Kupp are going to be on the field every single play, getting heavy doses of targets because the players behind them are barely NFL caliber players.
Dude, Ben Skowronek and Tutu Atwell, like, that's what we're dealing with.
Those guys aren't good.
No. And Skowronek is getting ownership. Not a ton, of course, but he's going to be relatively popular as a utility play because he's 1,800, and Atwell is getting 8.5% ownership. Do you have a preference on either of these guys? Do you go, fuck it, I'll go with Atwell because he's $1,000.
Honestly, that's kind of my thought here.
Me too, because I have no other way to differentiate, to be honest with you right now.
They're very, very different players. Skowronek is like this big, unathletic slot receiver, came out of Notre Dame. He played his first 4 years at Northwestern, grad transfers to Notre Dame, 7th round pick, if I'm not mistaken. Bad testing metrics. So he's kind of like a poor man's Cooper Kupp, and their skill sets offset a little bit.
Homeless.
Tutu Atwell's at least athletic. The guy's pint size. He's one of the smallest. He's smaller than Rondale Moore, which is absolutely insane, but he's at least fast, explosive. They play him on like kick returns and stuff. He's a high draft pick for them. Skowronek, 7th round pick. Atwell's a day 2 pick. Like they spent, I don't know why, but they spent significant draft capital on this guy. And it doesn't look great when those guys don't even get onto the field and give themselves a chance to pay off their draft capital. Atwell hasn't even been able to get on the field, but they gave him the starter treatment in the preseason. The guy didn't play at all in the preseason. So it seems to me he has some sort of role with this team in the regular season. If he's going to come in with less ownership, I'll take some flyers on Atwell for sure. Don't feel great about any of these ancillary options, but Atwell at least is the draft capital, which the other guys don't have.
Yeah, absolutely. At that price, usually you don't get guys that are this cheap that are actually going to have some involvement in the offense. You have to take shots on, when you have 2 really good teams like this in week 1, if everyone's usually healthy, but you have McKenzie, you have Atwell, Skowronek. I'm not saying these guys, these tertiary options for the Rams are exciting. They're not, but they're there. Are there any other options that we have? Any other cheap options on either side of the field that we haven't talked about yet? Because I think we've gone over everything and anything of relevant value, at least.
There's one situation I want to bring up with the Rams. So tight end, Tyler Higbee, we know he's locked into his role. The Rams only kept 2 tight ends in their roster, which unbelievable to me. But their second tight end is Bryson Hopkins. This guy played wide receiver in college. He was split out in the slot a lot. Do they maybe use him at times as the third wide receiver? Because he honestly has some pretty comparable metrics to like Skowronek and Tutu Atwell. That's a possibility. And Bryson Hopkins is the stone minimum. His projection's really not that much worse than them, and he's not going to be played by anybody. So we don't know what the Rams are going to do with this third wide receiver spot. If they decide to go into 12 personnel and split Bryson Hopkins out as a poor man's Mark Andrews, a poor man's Dawson Knox, a guy that plays a lot in the slot, there could be value there. So I'm going to play at least a little bit of Bryson Hopkins for that reason. No idea what the Rams do. It just comes down to uncertainty, but keeping 2 tight ends on the roster was pretty surprising to me.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody mentioned Tommy Sweeney for the Bills.
He's not bad.
What's that?
He's not bad.
No, he scored in a showdown slate last year. I remember it.
I think maybe we should touch on the Bills' tertiary options, because let's say Isaiah McKenzie's not 100%, and then they do have to use some Jamison Crowder. They do have to use some Khalil Shakir. Those guys could be playable. The problem with Crowder is he's 5K, and you have just a slew of cheaper options that are going to see more work than Crowder. And he really would need like a full-time injury to Isaiah McKenzie, I think, to pay off that salary. But Khalil Shakir, their 5th-round rookie out of Boise State, had an awesome preseason. He's kind of in the same opportunity that Gabe Davis was early in his career, where he's a mid-round draft pick, highly productive in college, tore up the preseason, just doesn't have the clearest path to playing time. Even if he plays a little bit in the event that McKenzie's limited, that could be useful at a cheap price in Showdown.
You think Tommy Sweeney's Irish?
I don't know what he looks like.
Dude, his name's Tommy Sweeney.
Maybe.
He's got to. Maybe.
I'm going to look him up right now.
He's got to, dude. There's no way that he is.
This guy has some flow.
I know. I looked him up too. It's something straight out of what's the show?
You're gonna lose me on shows.
Yeah, you're not gonna know. I used to watch it all the time, and then I just stopped. But apparently, it's still. Thank you, Peaky Blinders. Yeah, something straight out of Peaky Blinders. Main character's name's Tommy, isn't it? I don't know about Sweeney, but it's definitely Tommy. All right, so let's build a lineup. Before we do, though, shout out to everyone who put in all of the hard work. We do Stokastic Hall of Fame around here. That's just how it works. You win rocking our avatar. And you know what we do? We throw it up here. We shout you out. And if you get top 3 in a field of 5,000 or more, we hit you up with a free month of a Stokastic Plus account. Everything on the site entirely free. You win. Everybody wins here. And you get the shout out, which some people spend their whole lives seeking out. Just like John Harbison. He didn't say that, but he's pretty stoked. He said, so they helped me go with it again. Shout out to the whole team. Just in time with football a few days away to put that money to use. Boom. Good stuff, dude. A nice win right there. First place. And then next up, you got Pedro. $700 winning. Thanks. Very simple. Sweet. I love it. First place. 500. Must have had another 200 in there as well. Baseball win. Yeah, our baseball team has been crushing it. Liquor Connoisseur. That's our guy. Are you guys still doing Hall of Fame? If so, here you go. If not, thanks anyway for the assistance. And he's well-mannered as well. Look at that. $1,000. W. Westry down there. 4th place. Keep it rolling here. Josh, thanks to Stokastic. I came in second because of the information given to me during the morning show. CFB, yeah, dude, college football content crushing. $1,500 there. You got Alex J. Oh, our boy AB. Where you at, bro? Big shout out to my guys over Stokastic MLB for the help. I didn't see this. It's 460 into 19. How about that, Matt? AB up on Stokastic Hall of Fame, but he can't join us here on the show today.
Truly unbelievable, AB. He's gotten too big for us. These big wins. Now he can't come on the show with us. Unreal.
My concern is he's still offended by your Super Bowl take.
That's honestly probably more likely and deserved.
Couldn't pull up back-to-back W's, but a happy 2nd and 4th will do. Damn. Kip Perks, $14,000 there. And we'll close it out with, who's this? Oh, Jay Steed. What is that? $1 million. See, I haven't been in the baseball streets lately. Mega Millions, 1 million the first. Why is that? Was he rocking a Stokastic avatar? All right. Well, sweet. Anyway, congrats to all you guys. And of course, download the avatar. All you got to do, Stokastic. All you have to do when you make this happen is download it at stokastic.com/avatar. Put it up there wherever you play. Get a free month. Get up here. We got you covered. All right. Let's build a lineup, Matt. You ready to do this?
Yeah, let's do it.
Oh, quick question. Defenses, where do you stand?
I like them both. I think the Rams just naturally are going to have more opportunity. A really pass-heavy Bills team. They're healthy. Whereas on the other side, you're missing 2 of your top corners in Tre'Davious White. Well, not corners. 2 of your top secondary players. Tre'Davious White's out. Jordan Poyer is projected to be limited in this game. Those are huge losses for the Bills. So I'm going to tentatively side with the Rams, even though they're the underdog.
Okay. Yeah, and there is a Tom Sweeney, a musician. I saw that as well that Mike put on the screen. Matt, his it's titled Songs of Ireland. So if my hunch tells me that I'm probably correct, we should get Tommy Sweeney on the show and just pick his brain a little bit. Not the musician, the football player. All right, Captain, let's go. And let's say larger single entry contest, because there's a ton of them where you get, $50 single entry contest, still 15, 20, 25K to first. What, you want to do that?
Yeah, let's do that one.
All right. Where do you want to go? I'll let you go first, Captain.
I think we should do Diggs or Allen Robinson. Get some positive leverage with a projected high scoring player there.
All right. Let's throw in A-Rob. See what we can do with A-Rob. I'm going to go Cooper Kupp.
I think that's solid. You've got him in the flex now. We have A-Rob and Kupp. So we probably got to play Stafford.
You have to. Yeah, you have to. But we're not dead yet. You have 5,000 remaining. I'm not going to go contrarian yet. I just want to see what we can do with a build because I haven't built lineups yet. I'm going to throw McKenzie in there.
All right. So
7,500 per. That's way more than I thought we'd have right now.
Yeah, it's actually a lot. So do we leave salary on the table? I don't necessarily think we need to leave a ton because we don't have Kupp as a captain. McKenzie's in there, but it's kind of a unique construction around him. 7,500 left. I think maybe we should go like a Tyler Higbee, see what we can get with him afterwards.
Okay.
that kind of puts us at a decent range where, you can leave some salary on the table if you want, but you're still going to get a really good player.
Yeah, absolutely.
And now we have
McKenzie.
We have a triple stack with Stafford right now.
Yeah. All right. And then that gives you.
I mean, we could put a kicker in instead of Higbee too.
You could. Or you know what else I was thinking? If you wanted to go large field tournament, you could theoretically go Josh Allen and Zach Moss. Now, hear me out. What if Josh Allen runs in 2 and Zach Moss runs in 1 because the Rams have done such a good job of limiting passing touchdowns that Josh Allen just, rushes for 80 yards, racks up a bunch of yards passing, but doesn't throw any touchdowns. Just a thought. It's obviously not optimal, but you also have McKenzie in there as well. So there are ways to do this and be different.
For sure. I think if you go Higbee, Gabe Davis as your last 2, you leave 2.3K on the table.
Yeah.
But the only issue there is you don't have Josh Allen.
Right. Exactly. All right. Well, now we see what we can do at least. Like you said, you could have gone kicker and then paid up for a Diggs or something there. You could go Higbee with the triple stack. There's a lot. And Uptown said any 5-1 will be unique, somewhat unique. I don't disagree with that. Yeah. Especially with 2 really good teams. All right. So MLB strategy show coming up next, then NFL matchup strategy show, the marathon matchup strategy show with Matt Savoca and myself. Dude, Gajewski's got the best college football content over on the site right now and over at our Odd Shopper channel. If you're betting, hit all of that. I got my bets up there for tonight in the video. Check them out. Follow him at Matt_Gajewski, me at Laffy_D. And remember, we have a ton of new Showdown content on top of that. The lineup generator, free for the first week. We have 630 people watching right now and only 119 likes, Matt.
Unbelievable.
What is happening? It's awesome that we got 628 watching, though. Appreciate you guys. Hit that thumbs up before you go. But yeah, Neil Orfield, one of the best players out there, strategy videos, how he's building lineups. He has an article that's based all on strategy for Showdown. So we got you covered across the board. Appreciate you guys. You're the best. We'll catch you back here very shortly on the Showdown Strategy Show. Peace.